Last thing here.
All right.
We're going to shift gears to the offseason.
Cool.
I gave you a heads up beforehand. We already teased it. But I want to talk about players not involved in rumors, or at least not heavily involved in rumors. Not the guys we're always talking about, Giannis, Durant, Ja Morant, these kinds of guys.
Mm-hmm.
Players not involved heavily in those rumors that if you were a GM of a team, you would be calling about. Just because you're like, what's going on there? Is this guy available? And you're going to do your due diligence on these guys. Let me give you my first name because I already teased it.
Okay.
Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah, nice. He was on my list also, actually. Okay.
Extension eligible.
Yep.
What's going on with Memphis? If they do trade Ja Morant, you could say, well, double down on Jaren Jackson Jr., make him the face of the franchise, or you could say, tear it all down, start over.
Yeah.
They can go in either direction, and I think either one would be defensible. But he's extension eligible. Who knows what his thing is? Like, is he psyched to be in Memphis with Ja Morant, who's always in and out of the lineup? Who knows?
Yeah.
Does Memphis want to pay Jaren Jackson Jr. what it's going to cost to pay him? I would at least, if I were another GM, I would call. And if I was Tim Connolly, I would definitely call because that's the guy who would make a lot of sense next to Ant.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an incredible fit. That's like perfect for what they need. And you would need a haul, I think, if you're Memphis to really restart. I'm thinking like what would make sense from Minnesota side? They don't necessarily have their picks. And you're like, all right, McDaniels and maybe Memphis is interested in Gobert and they're like, they want that rim protecting big man next to Ja. I don't necessarily know what the trade would be if you wanted to do that. But he's definitely an interesting name. And he's also a name that I think a lot of teams would be interested in just because he had a good season, flamed out in the playoffs, definitely did not have a good postseason. But I think he was awesome. He took a step in his career as sort of like an isolation scorer at his position, and that's just so tough to guard. If he can continue to refine that would be a very interesting trade target. And I would not be surprised if Memphis is like, all right, we don't want to get expensive. They're also a team that notoriously does not like to pay the tax. So it's like maybe they want to retool, if you will.
Right. And can they grab Dillingham in that deal, right? As a Ja Morant understudy or potentially a replacement or a guy who could at least step in when inevitably Ja gets hurt, the next time.
Yeah, I like it. Actually, this next guy that I have is a pretty interesting one for Minnesota too. Coby White. How about Coby White? So
I like it.
Not necessarily in trade rumors. He's also extension eligible, but he's not a guy that's going to take the extension that's on the table this summer because let me see, he makes $12 million. And I think he can only make 140% of that on this current extension. If he walks into free agency, he'll obviously be able to make much, much more than that. So it's a position where obviously he's not going to get an extension this summer, and the Bulls will have to walk into free agency hoping that he can re-sign. Will they be proactive and trade Coby White in order to get something back? Or will they just, like the Bulls typically like to do?
Right, I was about to say.
Like really, really waste an asset here. I think Coby is a really good player, really good point guard, has learned to be a pretty good ball handler in this league, obviously an incredible shooter. He would pair really well in Minnesota also. Just as a guy who's like a release valve next to Anthony Edwards, who can handle the ball a little bit as well, let Ant play off ball more. Think that's interesting. I also think he's an interesting guy for the Raptors and who I cover. I'm kind of working on a piece on that right now. So he's kind of front of mind for me with Coby White, but he makes sense for a lot of teams. I think like you can sell yourself on him being a piece on a lot of these. I mean, think of Orlando.
I was just going to say, I'm already thinking Orlando should be calling. Can you just do hey, remember Wendell Carter Jr.? That would be kind of fun. Detroit to me makes some sense. If you're looking for that additional score. The Toronto thing is interesting. Would the idea to play Coby White ahead of quickly? Yeah,
there's a couple of different versions of that. With the log jam at the front court with Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, and RJ Barrett, I do think RJ ends up being the odd man out here. And so it's an opportunity to flip RJ for a guy who is a guard. And I think the Raptors are desperately in need of other guards. Yes, there's IQ on the roster, but they just need extra creation on top of Emmanuel Quickley. And there's also a version where, maybe if you have buyer's remorse on the Emmanuel Quickley contract, you trade Quickley for Coby White and, you like him more. So there's two different versions of that trade that could work. But I think I'd lean towards the RJ version just because there's a bit of a logjam at the front court spot. Yeah.
Kind of like that for both teams.
Yeah. And it seemed very ballsy to do. I don't know. It just, ends up
just lateral enough.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, we could get the 9th with RJ. Right. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
It didn't work for 2 teams, but it will work for us. I got Norm Powell.
Yeah.
What? So the Clippers, just in general, what are they doing? And I know there's been some speculation, like, what's James Harden going to do? What kind of contract he's going to get? And with Kawhi, would they ever explore trading Kawhi after this run and opening the arena? Like, maybe now is the time. That doesn't seem like a Steve Ballmer thing to do. I just think it's, hey, this team was pretty good. We made the playoffs. There's a lot of value in that, especially, just because the arena opened for 1 year doesn't mean you're like, all right, cool, everybody's sold on it. No, you got to, keep bringing these Clippers fans in. So those kinds of things seem a little too dramatic. And again, they're building. It's fine. You could be competitive and then just figure out what the next thing is when that time arrives. But with Powell, he's got a year left on his contract. He's 31 years old. He's the kind of guy that I think a lot of teams would want. And as good as he was for the Clippers last year, he might be more valuable at this point as an asset. It'd almost be like selling high, because that was a career year for Norm Powell. And I love Norm Powell, but are we really going to bank on him
doing it again?
And getting better at this stage of his career? Probably not.
Yeah.
So he was a guy that I actually was saying for the Thunder before the trade deadline. I was like, that would be a really cool addition to them. Obviously, they didn't need it. But teams like that can just use that other bit score that could either come off the bench or flank your superstar score or something like that. I think he could fit in a lot of different contexts. Super competitive, all the transition stuff. We know, Norm Powell's been in the league forever. We know about him. I would be calling if I were a front office.
Yeah, I think he fits in a lot of playoff teams. I actually think he'd be cool on your Heat. I think he'd make sense. That's another guy who's like really good scorer, solid defender, I think, at his position. And I know there's some salary situations with you guys where it's like, what is he at right now? What does he make?
It's a great question.
It's like 20.
It's like 20 something.
Yeah. So I don't know, Duncan Robinson and stuff or something along the lines of that. Maybe something like that could work, because I think Powell would work well with you guys. Is like, makes decisions on the go. Obviously works incredibly well off the ball. Great shooter. Yeah, I don't know.
I like that. I hadn't thought about that, and I put him on my list. I'm going to be on the trade machine a little bit later. You got another name?
Yeah, I do. So this is another guy who's extension eligible this summer. This is a bigger name though, and I think he will eventually end up being in trade discussions, but I don't think he is right now. And that's Trey Young. So Trey, obviously, first of all, I should say I really like the team the Hawks are trying to build around Trey, because they have Dyson Daniels, Reese Shea, Jalen Johnson. Like that if you want wing defenders to pair alongside Trey, that's like a perfect group to do it with. That being said, there's like a general manager change that's happening on that team. They're probably going to end up looking at, like, generally when a new guy comes into the front office, they're looking to build the team in their own image type of thing. And Trey's extension eligible. If they don't end up kind of agreeing on an extension, I wonder if it opens up the market for him to be traded. And so there are a lot of teams that I think would be interested in Trey Young. I honestly, there's name them, you can go down the list and probably make a selling point for everybody. I think about, some of these rebuilding teams like a Utah or Brooklyn would be really interested in Trey. But maybe there's a playoff team out there that I'm not thinking about that could also get in the mix for him. But yeah, Trey Young is another guy.
I think the extension eligible part of this is the key with Trey Young. Totally. And there's a theme here, obviously, but that whoever ends up leading Atlanta's front office is going to have to make a decision on Trey Young. And Trey Young's going to want, obviously, some direction, some clarity too, right? Like, Trey Young's representatives are going to go up to whoever the new GM is and say, where are we at on this?
What are we doing?
Yeah. This is your star player. This should be your number one priority on day one of your job. And if that GM, and if those conversations go sideways, we could get to a point where that report comes out on a Monday morning. Yeah. And it's, hey, Trey Young has had a conversation with Atlanta's management and both sides have mutually agreed to explore other opportunities or whatever, right? So I'm with you. I think that could be something that pops up, but we obviously need to know who's running the show there in Atlanta. Yeah. I think about the Sacramento Kings for Trey Young.
Oh my God, I was thinking about them just now. That's nuts. Yeah. Okay. What's your trade idea for the?
Well, I think he's exactly the kind of guy that the Kings would like. I think I'm stealing this from somebody. I want to say it was Zach Lowe, maybe on his show, said Sabonis for Trae Young trade, but
Right.
sorry if I'm getting that wrong. But it was a Sabonis for Trae Young, just kind of swap. And I thought that was really interesting. But if I'm the Kings, I want to put Sabonis with Trae Young.
Yeah, I would want to do the same. So like, what if you did like a Malik Monk and Keegan Murray type of thing,
right?
You know, and
that's interesting to me for both teams,
right? Because Atlanta gets a little bit younger. They have Malik Monk. It's like, hey, can Malik Monk run a show? Can he take a step to be a lead guard in this league? And then Keegan Murray, obviously good 3-and-D player, can add to that core. And then for the Kings, it's you have Trae, Levine, and Sabonis, and that might sound a little middling in the West. It probably is, but it's worth what they want to do, which is hunt out a playoff spot, you know.
And they would still have DeRozan.
And they would still have DeRozan, who they probably end up trading. That's another guy that I would imagine is.
I would be calling about DeRozan also. Yeah. The other one that I thought of, and this was a Locked On Heat topic, if Miami strikes out on everything that they want to do and Sacramento strikes out on everything when they do, is it like sort of last round at the bar, they look at each other's eyes and say, DeRozan for Wiggins? Should we just do this? Right. Kind of helps both teams.
Yeah.
Fixes a lot of issues right away.
Yeah.
Was that yours, Trae Young? That was yours.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I got 3 more, but I won't do all of them.
Okay. All right.
PJ Washington.
Nice.
And Jaden Ivey. I'm going to put them together here. You could kind of just respond with whatever one you think is more interesting. But the idea with Washington is what position is he going to play in Dallas? With all these bigs, it kind of feels like something like, they probably might trade Gafford here, but also with Washington, he's best as a power forward. He could still come off the bench as your third big. Yeah. But if I'm another team, I'm at least calling and seeing if I think I have a need for PJ Washington, I'd call. And with Ivey expiring on the rookie scale contract, I really liked what I saw from Ivey at the start of the year before the injury.
Yeah.
Is Detroit feeling a little bit like after this playoff run, hey, let's just upgrade that spot right away and go for it? Is that somebody that's gettable? Because I would take a flyer on Ivey because I've not given up my stock on him.
Yeah. I wonder if they're a team that's going to end up being patient and just being like, all right, cool. We'll bring back Schroeder and Malik Beasley and whatnot, and we'll extend Jaden Ivey. I think they might be able, just because of the injury this year, they might be able to not pay him too much. Like they can afford to maybe negotiate a little bit and say, hey, this is what we're offering you, take it or leave it type of thing. And if you want, we can kind of revisit this in the summer. So I would be surprised if Detroit does it, but the PJ Washington thing is undoubtedly interesting. And that was another guy who I was like, maybe Norm Powell for PJ Washington, like a swap there to get a guard for a wing.
Yeah.
Because Dallas obviously needs guards. I'm also trying to think of guards that Dallas could get. This is sort of where I'm at. It's like, can they go out and get another guy to add to this
Coby
team?
White could make some sense there too. Yeah.
Coby White could make some sense there. Obviously, they've been linked to Drew Holiday. That's an interesting name. So both of those names are interesting because I think they probably will end up getting moved, especially PJ Washington. I'm less I'm like confident on Ivey, although I could see a world where they're like, we have this player that we can trade for, and Ivey is the chip that we can use. That would make a lot of sense for me. Okay. This is we kind of mentioned them already, but the Darius Garland, Jared Allen thing, I don't think they will get traded because the Cavs won 64 games. But like, there is a world in which they decide, hey, we believe Mobley can be our full-time 5. And he showed, I mean, they staggered them more this year than they have any other year that they've been together. And I think that's worth mentioning because they are now leaning, they're sort of edging and saying like, hey, we're going to go with Mobley as our full-time 5 moving forward. Open the door for a Jared Allen trade. Maybe it ends up opening the door for a Darius Garland trade. I would love for them to get into the Giannis conversation with that. I don't know if that's enough for them to get into the Giannis conversation with that. I think there's also other stuff out there that they can do that could be interesting for just one of those players. We talked about the Minnesota situation, but I think there's a world in which they can kind of keep the same mentality and identity of what they want to do, but just take out one of those rotation guys and maybe make it into 2 or 3 that would make sense for them. But yeah,
I was playing around the other day with a Jared Allen for Mitchell Robinson swap. Because Allen could be on the court more than Robinson.
Yeah.
And if you decide that Cat is your 4, if you're the Knicks, then you need Robinson. I wouldn't trust him to start at the 5 all season. He would just get hurt.
Yeah.
Allen is durable. I'd at least trust him to eat those innings.
Yeah.
And then if you're the Cavs, you're saying, well, we don't really need Jared Allen as a full-time 5, but boy, would it be cool to get into that look every once in a while.
Right, a backup.
We'll start Mobley at the 5, back up Robinson, and then we can kind of transition into that look when we think we need it for a certain matchup. And Robinson defensively, plus Mobley defensively, I mean, forget about it.
Yeah.
I was toying around with that, but I don't think the Knicks would do it because they've just seen Jared Allen's playoff failings up close.
That is true.
And they probably have a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah, I struggle to find like a spot. I mean, people are going to say the Lakers and do like the Austin Reeves thing, but I don't know why the Cavs would want Austin Reeves here.
Unless they move Garland in another move.
Right, yeah. So it's tough for me to find like another destination for Jared Allen. I'm trying to think like maybe Sacramento would be interested here, but then again, what would Sacramento give up to the Cavs? Is it Keegan Murray? I don't know.
Is there a way that they can get him to Phoenix? Can they get Garland and Allen to Phoenix
for KD?
KD?
I guess that would be the trade right there. Yeah, because it's what
is that the salary?
$39 million for Garland and $20 million. Yeah, that's basically the salary. Basically looking at the exact salary. It's not bad.
Good. That's not bad. That's not bad.
And then you have Mobley, KD, Donovan Mitchell. I mean, there's worse teams than that. You know what I mean? You can definitely do a lot with that.
You would have to probably do it in 2 separate trades, but you'd have to, I don't know, they could figure out the cap part of it.
Yeah.
My last one is Draymond Green.
Ooh, okay.
If I thought I needed Draymond, I'd call. I don't know that the Warriors want to trade him. My guess is that they don't. But I would call and just see what's the temperature. Because
so my question there is like, who do you think would want Draymond?
Right. I think there's a difference between who would want Draymond and who should trade for Draymond. Because I could see the Knicks coming away from this and being like, we need Draymond.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even though they'd get lambasted on NBA Twitter.
Yeah.
I think a team like Detroit, a team like heck, I could even see San Antonio just being like, oh, we didn't really want Giannis, or but what if we had Draymond and Wemby? Like that would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Just a team that wanted that defensive presence, that veteran presence, leadership, whatever it might be. And if you can get him for cheap, I don't know, it'd be interesting.
That is.
I don't know what the fit is, right? But the Jimmy Butler trade really, it was a win of a trade for Golden State, despite how they went out in the playoffs. I still think it was a win for a trade for them. But they can't really play Jimmy and Draymond together. They were able to do it post-trade deadline and just have Draymond at the 5, but like that, they can't start next season with Draymond playing the 5.
Yeah.
Quentin Post is not the answer there. The Jonathan Kuminga thing is out there. Who knows if they're actually going to trade him, move him, whatever that. They could be forced to just bring him back next year. And we know that Joe Lacob, how he feels about Kuminga. He's super high on him.
Yeah.
So he could just say, we're not trading this guy for nothing, which might ultimately be what the price is.
Yeah.
So you can't bring those all, like it just seems tough to bring all 3 of those guys back. You just traded for Jimmy. If you can't trade Kuminga, do you end up just at least quietly taking phone calls on Draymond? Again, I don't think they're moving him. If I'm a front office that I think I could use him, I'd call.
The interesting team here, and I'll just mention another team, is Phoenix.
Ooh.
Because there was a conversation at the deadline where it was like, all right, cool, Draymond for KD. And to me, before the Jimmy trade, I didn't understand that because I was like, all right, how does that look for this Warriors team having KD instead of Draymond and no center behind them? Right. But I think now with Jimmy and some of the cap flexibility that they have, they can go out and maybe sign a center or try to trade for a center using like the Moody kind of salary if you want. Hey, they could go for Mitchell Robinson if they want. To me, that might make sense, especially because Ishbia is a Michigan guy and loves Draymond. Like, I'm pretty sure they went to the same school, right? I think that was a thing.
Michigan State, yep.
Right, Michigan State. So maybe that's something where they just want Draymond and Devin Booker and Draymond, and maybe there's I don't know. That's just something
Matt
that
Ishbia is just looking at the Knicks and be like, so the way to do it is just make sure everybody went to the same college, right? That's that's what we're gonna do.
That's funny.
The Nuggets could be interesting.
Nuggets could be interesting, like a Michael Porter for
correct. Draymond and Moody to Denver for Michael Porter Jr. And now you've got MPJ's spacing.
Yeah.
That could be.
But man, I mean, Denver doesn't have spacing in the first place, and you're like, what?
That would be pretty rough.
Even David Adelman in his post-season interview thing, he just said like, what he was asked, what is the thing you need, and he's like, shooting. That's the only thing.
Okay, so not Draymond. All right, last one would be the Lakers, right?
Yeah.
Draymond, clutch client. Not exactly the center that they're looking for, but they would easily talk themselves into it.
Yeah,
right?
it would really like lean into that small ball five identity that they had to finish this season. So I could see that. Yeah.
Reeves feels like too much to give up.
Yeah.
But is there a Dorian Finney-Smith plus Hachimura thing maybe, or a Finney-Smith plus the draft pick that was supposed to be for Mark Williams, or
right? Yeah.
And like a Dalton Connect piece or something like that could be interesting.
Can I give you one last one?
Please.
LaMelo Ball.
All right.
I don't know if they'll end up doing it, but this is another guy where it's like, Charlotte obviously is heading in they still are very far away from competing, and I kind of selfishly want to see LaMelo in a situation where he's actually trying to play and win basketball games. And, watching Halliburton this year, and I'm not saying they're similar players. I think Halliburton is a much more elevated version at this point in his career. Obviously, like just more refined, less turnover prone, et cetera, et cetera. But just like a big guard who is really, really creative and can be put in a situation in an offensive system that like makes sense to him. I would like to see that. And so I don't know who would even be that team. Or who would be willing to take on LaMelo, who obviously has his fair share of injuries and ankles and whatnot. But that's just another thing where I'm like, like, what if that could be a thing? What if like San Antonio is like, we'll swap two for, I don't know. I'm not sure what it would be. But
I'm with you on LaMelo. I haven't sold my stock on LaMelo. I think I want to see him in a place that prioritizes winning, that's actually trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
He was borderline unwatchable this past season with these one-legged sidestep threes and all this stuff. But I'm like, Brandon Miller got hurt early in the year, and I don't really know what else he was supposed to be doing. Like, he doesn't pass it. Well, who's he supposed to pass it to?
Yeah, they knew their objective very early into this season. Yeah.
So LaMelo was just out there being like, maybe I could be the scoring champion, And it's like, all right, cool. Put him in a situation like what Indiana did with Halliburton, where they said, we're going to build the team around you. We got some players. We got a good coach. We're going to go out and try to win some games. I don't know what that situation is because LaMelo is so high usage, but I wonder if you could bring him into a situation and bet on the talent, the size, the creativity, all the magical things that he has, and just say he'd be less selfish here, and we think we can harness him in a way that Charlotte just couldn't. It would be a fascinating bet if he landed on the right team.
Because also, like, what would Charlotte want in that situation? Because they're already young. They're already, like, in a position to tank if they want to again next season. Like, what else would they want? Would they want to accelerate their timeline? So then that might not match up with whoever they're trading LaMelo to. But if they're trying to go for younger and get more picks, then now I'm envisioning some sort of draft day trade where it's like, cool, San Antonio says, we'll give you Dylan Harper, but you can take the second overall pick and we'll take LaMelo Ball. And
we know what they're probably they're trying to rebuild in Boston's image, right? With Charles Lee, and they looked at how many threes that they took, so they could say, "Who's our Derek White?" Because we kind of feel like we need that more than we need LaMelo.
Yeah,
is there a LaMelo for Jalen Suggs thing that makes some sense? Jalen Suggs plus some stuff.
Yep.
I don't love LaMelo or Trey Young for that matter in Orlando. They just feel a little bit too high usage for me.
Yeah.
But could be interesting.
Yeah.